I am thrilled to be here. When they told me that they were expecting, 250, something like that, I thought, well, that's really wonderful, great turnout. Then I heard like 400 people signed up for this. So I am thrilled to have this opportunity not only to talk to caregivers, but also to the health professionals in the field about this model. Because even though Share the Care next year will have been around for 25 years, it's very grassroots. And it's really spread quite often, especially in the beginning, by word of mouth. And you can't get any better than that. So let me just start with saying, since this is National Family Caregiver Month, bless you and thank you to all the caregivers out there for all the hard work you do, because caregiving is the toughest job in the world for people who have no background in this kind of work. I also want to thank all of the health professionals out there who work very, very hard every single day caring and supporting all of the families and patients that they see every single day. And so you are all the audience for Share the Care. So let me get going. In case you don't know, we are facing a huge caregiving crisis by 2030, except that it's already here. We know that, and it's due to become one of the most significant social and economic transformations of the 21st century, just because of the sheer numbers of people who will be involved. It's global in scope. If you look at headlines today, you'll see all kinds of scary things going on. America is running out of caregivers just when it needs them the most. Who's going to take care of mom? You take care of mom, but who will take care of you? That's a big one. Or the Washington Post, who cares for the volunteer caregivers when they get sick? So we're going to address that today, because Share the Care is all about empowering caregivers to take charge of their own care in ways that are so profound and really wonderful. I'm going to show you a lot of examples of them in action. By 2030, this is what things are going to look like. There will be 71 million boomers, and many of them are going to need care because of all the issues they're facing. We're going to have shortages. We already have shortages of nursing and paraprofessionals, as well as geriatric professionals, even nursing homes, and younger people. So what are we going to do? Who's going to take care of everybody? We believe it will take all of us working together, and that's your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your acquaintances, faith communities, volunteers. I mean, everybody in the field who is doing work in caregiving is essential. We need even more than we have. And Share the Care offers a unique guide on how all of us can make a difference. Just think about it. If everybody in the community gave 2 hours a week to help someone they know or don't know, we could really change what 2030 is going to look like. And our communities would embrace caregiving as a natural part of our lives. 2 hours a week. Think about that. Share the Care is a book, and Gail Sheehy, in her book, Passages in Caregiving, cited it as it's more than a book, it is a philosophy. And I'm going to talk to you about how Share the Care was created, how it came about, because it all came from personal experience. But first, just an overview. Share the Care is the first comprehensive guide for ordinary people because it empowers them to create and maintain a caregiving family to help somebody they know. It's a gift to solo caregivers who burn out so fast it's unbelievable. And It's a way for people to learn to be a caregiver in the company of others. If you're a first-time caregiver, wouldn't you like to have help? Most certainly. Help us to prepare more people to be caregivers for the future. It educates people by starting with this first scripted meeting where everyone is encouraged to address the situation at hand truthfully, because they're going to hear what's really going on. There's not going to be any gossip or any hearsay or anything like that. And I'm going to go through all this a bit later. It provides systems so that Share the Care can create a way so that the workload can be shared among a group of people. So no one or two people end up running everything and burning out within a month or two. Also, we have 7 principles that keep a group running, and also 23 color-coded forms that help a group going. It's a guide. It offers advice specific to teamwork. We do not teach how to move someone from a bed to a wheelchair or anything like that. We suggest that people are trained properly by a health professional. But rather, the book is about teamwork, how to work together with a group of people that you may not know. It's the only model also that addresses what to do when there has been a dramatic change in the care recipient. I don't know of anybody else that does that. It's adaptable. It works for all kinds of challenges throughout the full life cycle. It's used by diverse cultures to help people of all ages. It's cost-effective and sustainable. It works in the urban areas, suburban, and rural areas. It builds trust because it encourages group members to work together and build relationships. They actually become very close friends. Users routinely recommend the model to others, and it's recommended by professionals, nonprofits, faith communities, and other authors. Too low? Now you can hear me better, I'm sorry. Okay. Daniel Goldman cited a Share the Care group in his book, Social Intelligence. It's innovative. It started off as a book, how to organize a group to care for someone seriously ill, but it has gone far beyond that. It has become also, when I first started out, I was trying to reach caregivers, but as you know, you're too exhausted to come looking for help or listening to someone talk about it. But I thought by teaching the health professionals and faith community leaders, they could introduce the model to their parishioners, their patients, their families who need this kind of help. It also, we have developed something called Share the Care Stations, too long to go into, but it's a place in a community where there is somebody trained in Share the Care who can provide coaching or information. Share the Care groups have also created a lot of new things like transitioning patients when they can no longer be at home into nursing homes or assisted living or hospices and continue their efforts to keep the person they're transitioning happy and really keep their quality of life quite high. It's also strengthens and supports hospital discharge. When a patient leaves the hospital with their loved one, they're given instructions on what they have to do and the kind of care that is needed. And sometimes, as you know, when you're listening to a doctor, it goes in one ear and right out the other. So by having 1 or 2 people from your Share the Care group assist you during that process can hopefully make a huge dent in all the readmissions that occur when someone leaves the hospital. Schools of nursing and social work, I think Share the Care should be part of the curriculum somehow, whether it's, something that's extra onto their curriculum, but I think it offers those professionals something to offer to their patients and families. Share the Care education could also be seen in community colleges and even high schools. I mean, we teach all kinds of things, but this is very practical. And as you know, many young people, children even, are caregivers. The impact, as I mentioned, next year it will be 25 years. Share the Care, we know, has been used in 49 states, 2 territories, and 19 countries. And I don't know how it got to some of them, but I guess the word of mouth is really good. And research, we have research, I'll touch on it lightly today, but it gives us the feedback that makes Share the Care an evidence-informed model. And last of all, we estimate at least 500,000 people have been helped by Share the Care in the past 25 years. I think it's probably much higher. So this is where I get into my story, because Share the Care came out of personal experience. If I put you in a time machine, I could take you back to 1984 when my first caregiving experience happened when I was taking care of my mother over here. My mother lived 5.5 hours away from me. I live in New York City. She lived upstate New York, and it was a 5.5-hour trip for me to reach her. My father had passed away in the early 80s, and my brother was in the State Department and lived in Japan, which couldn't have been further away from New York than the moon. And also back then, I'm sure some of you remember that if you were going to place an overseas call, you had to book it. So it was a big deal for me to actually talk to my brother and his wife. We communicated mostly by letters. So I started going up, and my mother was a 5'2", osteoporosis, osteoarthritis. She had severe asthma. She had COPD. She had a lot of issues. She fell in the snow up there, broke her wrist. It wasn't set properly, so her arm was not working so well either. And I convinced her finally, Mom, you got to move closer to where I am because I can't bring you to New York. I have a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. There's no way I could, do my work and take care of you at the same time. So I got her to move to a retirement community in the 4th year of my caregiving. And I thought, I found this beautiful place in Lakewood, New Jersey. It was called, the name escapes me at the moment, but it was a beautiful place, and they had a lot of activities, and I thought, this is great. My mom will love it. She's very social. So anyway, I get her down there, and during that 4th year, she says, I don't want to drive anymore. Then she says she, wasn't feeling well walking around, so we got her a cane. Then we got her a 3-prong cane. Then a walker. Then she was dragging herself around on a walker. And then she was in a wheelchair, and then she was falling and becoming confused. By this time, I was at Leisure Village, that's the name of it, 4 days a week. I had nurses' aides 3 days a week. And it was really, really hard. And all of you who are solitary caregivers know exactly what I'm talking about. You are depressed, you are isolated. My friends had no clue what was going on with me. Oh, Sheila's going to visit her mother again. What a drag. Their parents weren't old enough at this point for them to be dealing with this issue. The other thing was I had to quit my job. I was a freelance art director. You cannot be a freelance anything if you are a caregiver. So I had no income. I had no work. I had no social life. I never saw anybody. I knew nobody. I was like inside of a bubble. And even though I knew intellectually this couldn't go on, it took an outside voice. It took a nurse's aide who just said these words to me, your mother can't be alone anymore, to break the bubble that I knew was going on, but I couldn't move until somebody affirmed that this was what was really happening. It's kind of like being in a movie. You don't feel the reality of what's happening. So I went to my mother and I said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. We have to resort to a nursing home. And I could write a book about trying to find a good nursing home. Back then, because there was nothing for caregivers. There was no information. There was no help. There was nothing. So I went to the library. I found a book that somebody had written about how to evaluate a nursing home. And I looked at maybe 8 of them, and I finally found one that I thought my mother would be happy in. So I brought her there. She lived in the nursing home for 7 more years. So over the 4 years, I'm a solitary caregiver, and then over the next 7, I become her mother, essentially. My mother's, she knew who I was. She didn't have that kind of a problem, but she couldn't remember that she had lunch 15 minutes before. Now, you think this is enough for one person to be dealing with, right? These things don't come one at a time. At the same time this is all going on with my mother, my friend Susan Farrow here in the middle is one of my best friends. She's also like 5'2" or 3, and she's feisty like my mother, and she's got a really high-powered job in a Fortune 500 company. She's divorced, and she has 2 young teens. I'm over at her house one night because, having dinner with her and her daughters, and she's going like this, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Feel this." And I felt behind her ear, it felt like a grape. I said, "What is that?" She said, "I don't know, it just appeared out of nowhere." I said, "Well, maybe it's a cyst. You should go get it checked out." So she went to the doctor, and he said, "You're going in for surgery right away." She went and had the surgery, and she had radiation. And then she went back to work. Now, being one of her closest friends, I was sworn to secrecy that over the 4 years while I'm doing this whole thing with my mother, Susan's cancer comes back. Only this time, instead of being cancer of the parotid gland, a rare cancer, it is turned into bone cancer. It appears on her shoulder and her arm, and she has more surgery and more radiation. And so when I'm in New York, I'm running trying to help her, and the other days I'm, visiting my mom. Well, anyway, she went on for 4 years like that. And just when I put my mother in the nursing home, Susan had a crisis. She was going in the hospital the next week to have a test to see if the cancer had gone to her spine, and she was terrified that she wasn't going to be able to walk. How was she going to work? She had a crisis. But fortunately for her and the rest of her friends, she had a wonderful therapist, Dr. Suki Miller, who she was seeing. And finally, it was Dr. Miller who broke through to Susan. See how many people have to be broken through to? Call your friends. Get them to my office tomorrow night. We're going to have a meeting and figure out how we can help you. Do it. Finally, she called 15 people, and 12 of us showed up on less than 24 hours' notice. I'll never forget that night. It was March 15th, 1988. I walked into that room that night, and I felt such a sense of relief because I wasn't going to be the only one who knew what was going on anymore. There were other people. However, I didn't know but 2 other women in the room because all of the people were from different parts of Susan's life. It's kind of like when you have a surprise party and everybody you know is in the room together. You're terrified that they're not going to get along or something. Whatever. So anyway, we got down to work right away. Actually, my co-author, Cappy Capicella, when she arrived, she used to say she wanted to run for the hills because she had never cared for anyone or anything, not even a pet, her whole life, and she just wanted to go hide somewhere. We had all kinds of emotions going on in that room that night. So Dr. Miller asked Susan to please tell your friends what's going on, and she did. And she told them how frightened she was and what the test she was going to have would mean if it came out, positive. And she cried. Then we cried. And then we rolled up our sleeves and we went to work. That night, we came up with the key system for Share the Care, believe it or not. That very same night, this bunch of strangers. There were 12 of us, and we all had different kinds of jobs, different kinds of responsibilities, and so we decided we better work in teams of 2. We would call 2 people every week, the captains of the week. So we had 12 people, 6 teams, and the 2 captains, and we had 2 because if something came up in the life of one person, there was always another captain to keep the ball rolling, so it never broke down. We would go to Susan, find out what she needed, what were her requests, jobs, whatever we had to do. Then we would call. There was no email, no texting, no nothing. Everybody in our group, we would get the jobs filled. We would fill out a schedule of who was coming when to do what, for how long, so she could relax. Then the next week, we would rotate with another team, so we never burned out. It meant you were a captain once every 6 weeks. The other thing that working this way did was that Susan never had to call anybody to ask for help because we went to her every single week. Or if she had to, she could call a captain if she needed something in an emergency. And we started in the very next day. I was a captain with someone from Susan's office. But when we spoke the next morning about working together, it was as if we knew each other for years, because that first night had been so powerful, so real. Everybody learned who everybody was. We learned what everybody did for a living. So in that way, we began to uncover skills and talents and resources and connections that could help our group. And we did everything imaginable: cooking, shopping, cleaning, going to doctor's appointments, getting her medications filled, all of the things you normally do and more. We got the air conditioner fixed in July. We took her to the Bahamas for an alternative cancer treatment and kept someone with her for a week at a time. And then, maybe 4 months before our friend died, we organized her youngest daughter's wedding. We, by this time, this is three and a half years later, are widely known as Susan's Funny Family. Somebody gave us that name and it stuck. So anyway, that's us at the wedding, and Susan's in the front sitting at the table, and maybe 1 or 2 people are missing from the picture, but I'll never forget the bride thanking her parents for the beautiful wedding at Tavern on the Green, and thanking all her other moms for making it possible, because under Susan's direction, we organized every single detail for this wedding. It was spectacular, and it was a spectacular day for Susan. After she passed away, about 4 or 5 months later, we had a closing meeting, and we knew we had done something great, but we didn't quite get it yet. Until a couple of months later, I was working with Cappy. We were in advertising. She and I were a creative team, and our job was to come up with concepts and television and print ads for men's and women's fragrances. So we got to use all of our romantic fantasies to put into this work, and we had a great time doing it. So the phone rings, and we pick it up, and it's this woman, and she said, You don't know me, but I met Susan at Cancer Care, and she used to talk about all of you, the funny family, all the time, and all the wonderful things you did. And she said, I'm very much like Susan. I'm a divorced mom. I have a young daughter and an elderly mother who lives with me. I have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I am about to have a bone marrow transplant, which requires a great deal of care. Do you think I could have a funny family? I have 20 friends that want to help, but they don't know what to do. So I remember looking at Cappy and going, oh, geez, can we do this? Anyway, we pulled together our team, and we met with these other people. These 20 people showed up at this meeting. And there were men in this group. And they came in, and I could see in their faces that they were feeling all the things that we felt when we first started. Scared, nervous, skeptical, you name it. But as we talked and as we explained to them how we worked, we saw them visibly relax because they were like, they didn't say a word, but they were thinking, oh, that's what they did? Oh, that makes sense. We can do this. You know, they were raring to go by the end of the meeting. And there was also an incredible amount of love for Francine in that meeting. That is what inspired us to put Share the Care down on paper so that no one would have to reinvent the wheel. It was published in 1995 by Simon & Schuster. Down here, that was the first edition. That's Cappy and I, many, many years ago. And it started spreading grassroots style. There was a lot of publicity for it in the beginning because it was very unique. And we would hear from groups, and we were so excited because people were picking up the book and they could do it. And they were doing all kinds of amazing things. Fast forward to 2002, when something else rather dramatic occurred. In 2002, in January, Cappy's dad, who was 86 but in great shape, was suddenly diagnosed with a glioblastoma grade 4. And Cappy was very nervous and looking for the best doctors for her father, and she was, you know, a bit nuts, to put it lightly. And she went up to visit her parents, and the next thing I know, I learned she is in the hospital, diagnosed with a glioblastoma grade 4, within 2 weeks of each other. I organized a group to care for Cappy. It's very ironic that she, who, you know, was my partner in writing this book, now needed a group. 33 of us came together. She lived alone in New York, and her family was in Westchester, but they were taking care of Dad. So 33 friends came together, and we had a meeting, and we organized into Cappy's Brain Trust. She opted for brain surgery, which left her unable to speak, write, walk, move, or do anything. It took all of us to keep things together for the next 10 months until they both passed away within 12 hours of each other. That will do it. That took me over the top, and I said, enough with the advertising. I couldn't have a bigger, more dramatic sign that this is the work I'm supposed to be doing. So I founded Share the Caregiving in 2003, and our mission is very specific: to improve the quality of life of anybody who needs support, and to reduce the stress, the depression, the isolation, and the economic hardship of their caregivers. And I updated the Share the Care book and added 50 more pages from our work we did caring for Cappy. We had to invent a few new things. And also, I did informal research with groups around the country and added some of their suggestions into this. And the book rights are owned by my organization, not by me. Built a website. Our website is very comprehensive. It's broken into sections: caregivers and their friends, health professionals, faith communities, and corporations, so you can find what you need. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I created a curriculum to teach health professionals, which is accredited by the Northeast Multi-State Division of Nursing, so that I could go out and train professionals around the country in this and get it ingrained into communities, which has been successful. So I've trained maybe 1,600 professionals. It's a plan of action. This is what Share the Care is all about. It's based on collaboration, teamwork to support the caregiver, the patient, and the individual members and the family of the patient, so they can provide emotional, social, and practical support that is customized to the needs of that person, whether they're at home, in the hospital, wherever they are. And this is how it works, very briefly in a nutshell. A Share the Care group is not started by the caregiver. You have enough to do. You have enough to worry about. You're exhausted. It's started by two friends or people you know who really want to help. In fact, the first 9 chapters are written to these two people so that they can work with the family to figure out who to invite and what kind of help is needed before the meeting, so that everyone at the meeting can check off the jobs they feel comfortable doing and others they never want to go near in their life. You get to pick and choose what you're going to do. No one's forced to do anything. So they will run the first meeting, which is scripted. Everything we did in those early meetings is in this book. It is scripted. We call the two people only for the purposes of the meeting. And again, I repeat, only for the purposes of the meeting, the leader and the coordinator, because the coordinator is going to put together the paperwork that the group will need. But the idea is really, it is, you get your marching orders from the caregiver and or their caregiver about what you are doing. It is not a group coming in to take over somebody's life. It is supporting what the caregiver and the patient want and need. And then the two people will decide with the family where to have the meeting, when to have the meeting, and they'll collect the people, call them, invite them, and hold it. And that gets it going. At the meeting, people choose their level of commitment. They can be a full-on member, or if they can only help once in a while, we call them a free floater, but it's important to have free floaters who can fill in when you can't find somebody for a specific job. And as I said, no one does a job they're not capable of doing. So by this meeting, everyone meets. They're going to hear what's going on. They're going to find out what the jobs are. They're going to see who the other people are. They're going to start to work in teams so that they leave with a plan of action and a sense of commitment right from the get-go. There are 7 principles for team building, which you have or can get at the tables over here. I sent a whole bunch of these, so it's part of the handouts. Groups are made up of everybody, and I really encourage groups to include everybody, even the elderly neighbor who can't do much but maybe can, get the mail out of the mailbox or whatever. Children, we don't want to isolate children from caregiving because caregiving is part of our lives. So children need not to be afraid of being around someone who's ill or someone who has Alzheimer's disease, as long as, they feel okay about it. Also, it's not about a Share the Care group versus nurses' aides or other people who come into the home to help. We are all in it together. So we're all part of the same team. Even people who live in another state can contribute. They can do research. They can make calls for you. They can do a myriad of things. Even people who have their own health issues want to help. And if you give them a chance, they'll tell you what they are able to do. We had a retired nurse who had fibromyalgia who wanted to help. She was in New Jersey, Cappy was in New York, but she said, I don't always feel good, so I can't drive to New York, but Send me all the bills for processing and I'll handle them because I understand that. And I do it when I feel good, at my computer. Oh, don't you think the rest of us were glad not to have to do that? Oh, it was a godsend. Students of nursing and social work, it's a nice place to get your feet wet to really find out what caregivers have to face. I mean, you can hear about it, but until you see it in action, it's another story. So everyone has something to give. A Share the Care group is meant to support the entire family. And if someone has no family, their friends and neighbors can be a family. So that's really key. Share the Care has worked through the full life cycle. Difficult pregnancy, preemies, multiple births, parents with children who are ill, grandparents raising small children, don't want to forget about them. Seriously, chronically ill or disabled people, rehabilitation following surgery or whatever. Older adults who live alone, who are in good shape but need socialization and support. It's perfect. End of life, all the way up through end of life. And it's a journey that, if you take it, is sincerely profound and amazing. Teens transitioning into foster care, that's what it was used for. Now, these came up not by us in the book telling them this in the beginning, they evolved. So we learned from the people using the model. Caregivers can keep referring to the guidebook throughout the course of their caregiving. It offers all kinds of suggestions, quality of life suggestions, group problem solving, and facing your own emotional issues as a group member. Because if your friend is ill, you start looking at your own life and saying, hey, what am I doing? Life doesn't go on forever, and I gotta clean up my act and get my life together. But by helping others, you learn so much. Share the Care is an evidence-informed model. I'm just going to touch on this lightly. It was published. The title of it is The Role of Unpaid Volunteers in a Group Caregiving Approach, Validation of the Share the Care Program by Dr. Amy Hegener, and it was published in the Journal of Gerontological Social Work in 2016. If any of the professionals here want a copy, you can contact me. I can send you one. The study included 134 people who were caregivers, care recipients, and group members from not only the US and Canada, but Australia, and we had representation from the UK and Hong Kong. The research questions: does participation reduce caregiver burden and burnout? Is there an association between participation and improved confidence in caregiving skills by working this way? And is there an association between Share the Care's unique structures and processes and group members' satisfaction? We also found that among the groups, and this was retrospective, this study, it was, in the past, 75% of those providing assistance were for individuals with serious or terminal illness. All the groups were for adults. 34% were for senior citizens. Half, approximately, lasted a year or longer. Some go on much, much longer. And 3/4 of the group members contributed between 1 and 6 hours a week, depending on what they could do. Evidence shows that Share the Care supports a care receiver's ability to stay at home. They don't have to go to the nursing home right away or assisted living. Helps to reduce the burden of the caregiver. That's almost a given here. It increases the caregiving preparedness of group members, enabling them to be more effective teammates and future caregivers. And this is really important. It's replicable, and its functionality can be applied across a variety of settings and circumstances. It ensures longevity and a successful caregiving experience through its structured system of care. and has a positive impact on the well-being of everyone involved, the caregiver, the care recipient, and the individual members. Group members were satisfied with the helping experience. 93 felt it made a difference in the care receiver's overall well-being, and 73% increased their awareness of their own health. As you know, or if you need to be reminded, you must take care of yourself as a caregiver. If you break down and get sick, then what happens? So accepting help is not a sign of weakness or defeat or something like that. It is actually a sign of strength and reality that you need help if you're going to do this, one of the toughest jobs in the world. So caregivers were better able to balance caregiving with other responsibilities. This woman said, "Without our group, it would have been nearly impossible for me to continue my employment while caring for my sibling." Another person who is a group member said, "I had never imagined myself as a caregiver, but I now feel more confident in myself being able to give care, such as moving someone, feeding, etc. It has assisted me in being more proactive and capable of looking after my own young grandchildren." And this last quote is very typical of what we get from care providers who are group members. "It was the most rewarding experience of my life. It proved that I could contribute so much without feeling overwhelmed or overburdened. It taught me to trust others and also to know the real meaning of teamwork. Emotionally, being able to choose to help according to my strengths and pass the buck when I felt weak was a godsend." So everybody has something to give and help each other as well. So Share the Care is really great for broad-scale replication. It's low cost. The cost of the book is $18, okay? You don't have to pay $1 million to get the help you need from your friends. We just have to get everyone into that mindset. It's adaptable, and I'm going to show you a lot of different kinds of groups so you'll see what I'm talking about. It's sustainable. It helps to address multiple objectives such as decreased caregiver burden and social isolation. Better prepare communities to meet the challenges of an aging society and to improve end-of-life care. These are the groups I want to show you, and every single group is using Share the Care, but every single group is unique because no group is exactly like another. And they're defined by the conditions, circumstances, ages, attitudes, the cast of characters that's in your group. Their personalities, the needs, the culture, the location, as well as the challenges of being in a rural area or suburban or wherever. So these are just some unique examples. Some groups have learned new skills, and others do a lot of fundraising. Francine is the woman I told you about in the beginning, who was the first Share the Care group after Susan's. She had no money. She was poor as a church mouse. They did amazing fundraising so she could go out of town. In fact, I think she came to Texas for an alternative treatment that kept her alive for many years. The group at the top, Peg's Legs, is rather unique. They had 100 people in the group. This woman was a well-known artist on the island of wherever Honolulu is, and they all came together and they worked in shifts during the day. There were 3 people on a shift, and 1 person in each shift was trained in ALS protocol. That's Lou Gehrig's disease. And they did fundraising, so at night she had professionals. She never went to the hospital. She lived for 6 years at home. She continued her artwork. I'll show you a bit on that later. But anything is possible with a group of diverse people. Travel out of town for treatment. We did that both with Cappy and Susan. We tried alternative treatments. So I added a whole chapter in the book about taking someone out of town when you have a group, how you can share the preparations and the research and making it all happen and keep in touch. One group in Australia did a newsletter so that they could let people who were friends or part of the group know what was going on. Special projects. Now, these are things you don't normally think of for caregiving, but over here, Jeannie's group in Oregon, they had a 3-story home, and she's in a motorized wheelchair. That wasn't working, so they got the group to help them prepare the house to sell it and move and get them unpacked and settled in their new ranch-style home. The other group over here, Bet's team in Wisconsin, she was dying of cancer, but she wanted to build her dream home that looked like nobody who was ill lived in it. And her group didn't say, oh, why are you doing that, or don't bother, or something horrible like that, but rather, yes, we stand by you, we'll help in any way we can. And she did. She had her house built. Creative projects are critically important to people who are ill. If they're artists or writers or musicians or whatever they are, and you want to do your best to help them continue with their creativity, their legacy, all the way to the end. This group in New Hampshire, FOPAC, was the group that was cited by Daniel Goleman. They were an amazing group. And Peg was a painter. She painted with her right hand, her left hand, her mouth, and then when she could no longer move or communicate, she was on a computer using her eyes to communicate to someone how to paint her pictures, where to put the colors. Transitions and education. Team Betsy in Colorado was started by a social worker who was burning out from caring for his wife for so many years. And one of the things they did at their meeting was to inform the participants in the group about MS, which is what his wife had, so they would feel more, have more understanding of what was going on and what they needed to provide. He went into the hospital about 1.5 years later. But he could recuperate there because he had 80 people taking care of his wife. These just happen to be large groups. Not all groups are that big. And transitions. We have seen Share the Care groups transition their care recipient into nursing homes, into assisted living, and hospice settings. And we have information about that in the book as well. Spiritual practices are very important to groups. The group at the top from Wisconsin built a labyrinth, which their care recipient wanted, so she could walk the labyrinth. They started walking the labyrinth, and they had a memorial out there on the labyrinth afterwards. There is a faith community I trained in New York who had 150 parishioners from 30 countries, who 50 of those became part of the care crew, who were like a Share the Care team operating a little bit differently for people within the parish. And now they've gone out into the local nursing home to bring, joy to somebody in a nursing home with no visitors, on their birthday or holidays. Bereavement, comfort, and support. This is a very important part of caregiving that is often not talked about, but it's very important when someone dies to have people around you who are also grieving and can carry each other through. Karen Hill at the bottom passed away early on in the time her group was happening, but the group did not disband when she died. They kept together for another year to support her young daughter and her husband. Lgbtq. This is a woman who within 10 days faced a diagnosis of terminal cancer and the unexpected death of her partner. She had 2 groups come together because she came to New York to Sloan Kettering for treatment, so she had a group in New York where her sister lived, and also back home in Kansas. And you remember I mentioned Texas. Well, Texas has a big heart. A young couple moved to a little town in Texas. I don't remember the name. They joined a church. She was pregnant. Lo and behold, a few months later, she gives birth. Not just to one baby, but to four. You got quadruplets. And so they were very far from their family and their friends. So there was a woman in the church who had to share the care group for her daughter with ALS. So she said, I know what we can do. She went to the church. She recruited 40 or 50 grandmas and grandpas, as well as younger people. She had their picture taken. She asked them to write little bios. They went to the family, and they gave them the little book of people, and they said, we really want to come and help you. We know how hard it is to take care of one baby, never mind four. And we can hold them, we can feed them, we can clean the bottles, we can fill the formula, we can change whatever you want. They became known as the diaper darlings. And Mom, who was a little skeptical at first, started telling other multiple birth moms about Share the Care, because it's a great way to help. And this other one in Wisconsin I love. Now this woman, Dolores, was a baker, so she knew a lot of people. But her neighbor was moving far away. She lived in rural Wisconsin, where there's a lot of snow. So her neighbor organized a Share the Care group before she moved away. So people would take Dolores, who's 96, but in good shape, especially mentally. She was totally sharp. To town, to the doctor, to shop, to go to the movies. But her favorite outing is to go with the Meals on Wheels guy and deliver meals to the other elderly people in the area. Social support. There is a group in Maryland called Harriet's Harem. Now, I remember this name when they started because they told us they were starting Share the Care, and they told me the name. Who could forget Harriet's Harem? So lo and behold, I discovered in a newspaper not long ago that they're still going on. Now it's 23 years. They're not doing so much hands-on care anymore, but rather keeping their friend from being isolated. They're talking with her every day. She's providing her advice to them about situations. So it's worked out very well. And this other group of runners has mobilized 3 times, twice for people who were ill and once for a couple who were seriously, seriously injured in a car accident. And in fact, the 2 people that started the group moved in with them. It was that serious. So that concludes these examples, but I just want to point out some of the things that I think we all need to be doing. And then I'll take some questions. We have some time. It is very important that we educate people before they become caregivers. And the best way to do that is to have them being part of someone's Share the Care group to learn on the job, not isolated and having to start all by yourself. But if we all start helping each other, we can make this happen. Teaching the benefits of accepting help and what giving help means for the whole community. The hardest thing I have found with talking about Share the Care to some caregivers is their willingness to accept help. It is not, as I said earlier, a sign of weakness, but rather it is a sign of being realistic and being a very strong person to allow people to help you. Because people do want to help because they get so much out of it. They really do. It's a high to know that you have made a difference in someone's life. And creating awareness of why it is critical that all of us, be you a health professional, a caregiver, or anybody, that we start building our own networks and support systems and getting our own paperwork and wishes organized and on paper, and tell someone about it and where they are. And start talking about this among your friends so you can have support and be their support when it's needed.